Thank you for joining us today. I'm Trevor Leahy, the Small Business Ombudsman with the Oregon Secretary of State. I work for the Office of Small Business Assistance, and if you're in business and you've got a question, concern, or problem with a state or local government agency, we're the team that you can contact. Today's presentation is about hiring employees. I want to express clearly that this presentation is going to provide an overview rather than a comprehensive list of everything involved in hiring employees and being an employer. There are so many different scenarios and variables that go into each different business that it would be impossible to develop a presentation that applied to every single business or employer. I'm going to provide some of the more common things that occur for businesses hiring employees and offer that our team is available for follow-up questions outside this presentation if needed. I'm going to be breaking the presentation into 3 parts as shown here. Part 1 will apply more to those who have never hired an employee before and might not be familiar with some of the obligations having employees comes with. That doesn't mean it won't apply to more experienced employers. I'll talk about some common mistakes that are made, and then I'll move into employee rights and employer responsibilities, which really go hand in hand. I'll talk about some of the taxes which may be involved in hiring employees, and then I'll move into part 2, which is going to be brief and is going to apply more to businesses that might be from outside Oregon, but hire Oregonians to work remotely. Part 3 will involve resources which can be used by any employer, regardless of their experience as an employer. So part 1 for our first-time employers involves common mistakes. Know that hiring employees can be expensive and it can be complicated. There are lots of rules to follow, and almost all of the time the responsibility falls to you as an employer to know everything or at least know where to find answers. Some common mistakes made by businesses include the enlistment of friends or family members to help with functions of the business. There's no exception in Oregon law to hiring friends or family members as employees. The laws for friends or family don't exist. People that work for you, whether they are friends, family, they can't volunteer to help you. Oregon law says that individuals can volunteer for government agencies or nonprofits only. If you have a business and someone you know is just giving a hand, that person might be performing the duties of an employee and would have all the rights of an employee and be subject to the requirements involved in being an employee. If you're bringing in someone to help out and you want to bring them on as an independent contractor, you probably need to really educate yourself on knowing the difference between an employee and an independent contractor, because you as an employer would be held responsible for making sure that they're independent under the law. If they are later found out to be an employee rather than an independent contractor, your business could be liable for back taxes and possible penalties involving their misclassification. Our team's done many presentations on the topic of independent contractors versus employees, and those can range anywhere from a half hour to 2 hours in length. I don't want to get too detailed about that. We do have one of our presentations that we conducted recently on our website. I would suggest more research if you can't answer the question of whether someone is an independent contractor or whether they're a part-time employee and how you came to that distinction. Finally, and very less common, is bringing an intern into the business to help out. Interns must do work that is tied to their education. And if you're looking to bring on an intern, paid or unpaid, to perform duties that you could be hiring an employee to do, you are probably bringing on an employee rather than an intern. It's a good idea to research all of these things and ask questions before committing to anything in order to avoid costly mistakes. So when it comes to employee rights, there are a lot more that exist than I am listing here. These are some of the more frequently asked about questions, and it's a good idea to keep at least these things in mind when you're considering hiring an employee. The first is minimum wage, and Oregon has different minimum wages based on where the work is performed. As of July 1st, 2020, the minimum wage in Oregon ranged from $11.50 per hour in non-urban areas to $13.25 per hour in the Portland metro area. The minimum wage increases each year and is scheduled to continue doing so through 2023. And that happens every July 1st. You can get more information about minimum wage and about the minimum wage increases that happen every year from Oregon's Bureau of Labor and Industries, which I'll mention a few times throughout this presentation by the acronym BOLI, B-O-L-I. Oregon employees get mandatory sick leave, which may be paid or unpaid, depending on how many employees there are in the business. Even if you have one employee, your first employee, they would be eligible for unpaid sick leave. That program is also administered by BOLI, and I'll have information about services they offer and where you can go to get information during part 3 of this presentation. As an employer, you might need to have workers' compensation for your employees in case they are injured on the job. Workers' comp is handled by the Department of Consumer and Business Services, which is a state agency more often referred to as DCBS. They have their own team. It's a team of 2 people who provide free help and information to small businesses. I'll provide their direct contact information in part 3. They'll be able to tell you whether you need workers' compensation and what resources are out there. Employees are entitled to meal and break periods, which depend on the duration of their shift. Employees not receiving their required breaks or lunches can file complaints against their employers with the Bureau of Labor and Industries. BOLI serves both businesses, employers, and employees. So they cover both sides of a lot of different labor laws. Oregon also has a mandatory retirement savings program called Oregon Saves. That has an asterisk by it because I wanted to make sure I clarified that it is a mandatory program most of the time. If an employer doesn't offer their own retirement savings program, they must withhold a percentage of the employee's pay and deposit into an Oregon Saves account, unless the employee chooses to opt out of the program. But every employee that just is hired and doesn't have a retirement savings and doesn't opt out will have part of their paycheck deducted under the law through Oregon Saves. Oregon Saves is administered by the Treasury here in Oregon. You can find information about opting out of Oregon Saves and what your obligations as an employer are at oregonsaves.gov. So as an employer, you have responsibilities, as I've talked about. A lot of those involve workplace safety, and Oregon OSHA is a division of the Department of Consumer and Businesses, DCBS, which I mentioned just a few moments ago. OSHA ensures that employees working on site for an employer are safe from harm. If you hire employees who will be working from their home, OSHA doesn't necessarily need to come inspect their home. But if you have a work site, you can expect to be visited by OSHA inspectors who will audit the work environment for safety. They will give you a list of things that need to be corrected. They do have the authority to close a business if things are particularly hazardous. The cool thing about OSHA is you can proactively request an OSHA consultation, which is free and confidential. When you request a consultation, OSHA comes and they assess your work site and tell you if something is out of compliance without issuing any penalties and without sharing their findings with the enforcement teams who also work for OSHA. So it's free and confidential if you proactively ask them to come. Employees are also entitled to discrimination-free workplaces. BOLI has an entire division on civil rights, and they're the ones that investigate discrimination allegations from employees against employers. It doesn't even necessarily have to be against employers. Consumers can also file a civil complaint of discrimination with BOLI, but you want to make sure that you have policies that keep your workplace discrimination free. Oregon Child Support is another program that is required for employers. Anytime you hire someone, you're required to notify the Oregon Department of Justice in case that individual that you hired has an outstanding child support garnishment in place. The Department of Justice handles that program, and they will tell you whether someone you hired has a garnishment and whether you need to start withholding child support payments from their paycheck. I've given the website for the Department of Justice Child Support Program. They have a lot of contact information and resources on their website that I would recommend. So taxes. I mentioned that hiring employees can be complicated and expensive. There are a lot of taxes that come with being an employer. Most of those taxes fall under the 4 bullet points I've listed here. Payroll withholding tax. Oregon is one of those states that has income tax, and that is paid by employees when you as an employer withhold pay for those taxes. Unemployment insurance tax is not something that employees pay into. You pay unemployment insurance tax as an employer, and it's based on the actual wages that you pay someone. It's a percentage. And if you have a lot of turnover, your unemployment insurance tax rate can go up. If you don't have a lot of turnover, it can stay low. The range is generally between 2.5% up to about 5.5% of someone's wages. There's also the Worker Benefit Fund, which is a tax that goes towards workers' comp and benefits that would pay out to those who are injured at work. Oregon also has 2 different transit districts which are subject to employer taxes. They are TriMet if you're in the Portland area. If you're an employer in the Eugene area, it's the Lane Transit District. Just like unemployment insurance and the Worker Benefit Fund, it's based on the actual salaries you pay your employees, and a percentage of their salaries that you report are paid to transit taxes. There's also statewide transit taxes, which are paid by employees. This all sounds complicated, and there should be a list of which taxes are paid by employees and which taxes are paid by employers. That is why we strongly recommend that if you are an employer, you consider investing in an accountant to help you understand tax obligations. The information is out there. You could understand it. You could also spend your time and money elsewhere and invest in someone who can help you navigate all of this. Another tax that is coming soon is paid family medical leave. Paid family medical leave is a new program that will be through the employment department. Essentially, if someone is going to be out of work for a long-term medical condition, right now that is protected unpaid leave. However, Oregon will have that option to be paid, and it will be subject to taxes paid by employers, which will be based on the wages and hours paid to their employees. It starts in January 2022. That is when employers will have to start reporting their employees' hours and earnings to the paid family medical leave program. All of these 4 tax programs and potentially paid family medical leave are handled by obtaining a business identification number, a BIN. A BIN is a state tax number that is only used for payroll taxes. If you're going to hire employees in Oregon, you are going to need to get a BIN. You will also need to get an employer identification number if you don't already have one. An employer identification number is a federal number that you get from the IRS. They are easy to get, they are free, and they take about 10 minutes to get. BINs are also free, and they take about 2 to 3 weeks to obtain. Part 2 is going to apply more to experienced employers who might not be present in Oregon, but are hiring new employees who live in Oregon. Those employers are going to need to set up a payroll account, and they're going to need to get the business identification number. It takes 2 to 3 weeks to receive, and it's used for withholding, unemployment insurance, transit taxes, and workers' compensation. You can get a BIN by submitting a paper form called a combined employer registration. You can also get a BIN through the Secretary of State's website. We offer an online BIN registration. What we do is take the information and we forward it on to the Oregon Department of Revenue, and they process the BIN application. It's important to note that if you are an out-of-state employer and you are going to be hiring an employee, you may not be required to register your business with the Oregon Secretary of State. It really depends on what that employee is going to be doing. If they are going to be working from their home and they're going to be serving everyone out there, you might not have a business presence in Oregon. But if you're hiring someone specifically to provide a service to Oregonians and you are hiring them in order to profit from the Oregon economy, that might be a situation where you would need to register with the Oregon Secretary of State. But it doesn't, just having an employee doesn't establish enough of a business presence that registration is required. One thing that having a BIN does is it does obligate you for doing quarterly payroll reports. And if you hire a payroll company, they will handle that the majority of the time. But if you are a new employer, it's important to remember that having that BIN does obligate you to do these quarterly payroll reports. The instructions for doing those quarterly payroll reports are available online at oregon.gov/payroll tax. I am happy to report that as of this morning, those instructions have been updated to 2020. Those instructions are updated every March. In March of next year, you can expect to see new payroll instruction forms for quarterly payroll reports. If you do not submit quarterly payroll reports, even if you don't have employees, you have to tell the Oregon Employment Department and Department of Revenue and Department of Consumer and Business Services that you have 0 employees. Failure to do so can result in expensive fines and estimated tax reports that approach the $10,000 mark. It's important to remember that if you don't have employees and aren't looking to hire employees, you might want to reconsider getting a BIN. Having employees might also require bully posters. These are the labor posters that many of us have seen hanging in common areas that talk about minimum wage and civil rights and what the law says about meal breaks. Normally, those posters are placed in common areas so that employees have a chance to see those. If you have someone working from home, or if you have someone who is mobile and doesn't have a single work location, it's important that they at least have access to those. So if you had a construction business where people were going from job site to job site, you can get the bully posters. You can get them for free, and by printing them off of the bully website, you can put them in the glove compartment. If you have someone working from home, you can send the employee the link. As long as the employees know that the information is out there and that you've done your part as an employer to provide them the information, BOLI considers your bases to be covered. It's worth mentioning that there are scams out there where you can purchase BOLI posters. If you don't have employees, you're not required to hang any, and you don't need to buy any. If you want to get fancy, glossy, large posters that have all of the required labor information, you can purchase those from BOLI, but you can also download and print black and white versions free of charge from BOLI's website. Part 3 are the resources. I gave you a lot of information. It is not comprehensive. This is where to go to find a lot more comprehensive detail. BOLI Technical Assistance for Employers is an excellent resource if you are hiring employees. It's free and confidential. They do not disclose your identity. They won't even ask for the name of your business when you call. They are approachable. Their phone number is 971-673-0824. Their email address is bolita@boli.state.or.us. And their website is oregon.gov/BOLI/employers. Because they're confidential, you can contact them and ask them tough, ugly questions about whether you have to do something, and they will straight up tell you what the law says about it. They also have a lot of frequently asked questions, so you can research whether the question you have has already been addressed on their website. The Workers' Compensation Ombudsman, they're a two-person team that work out of the Department of Consumer and Business Services. They have taken the unusual step. They have both posted their cell phone numbers. So the first phone number, 971-283-0997, belongs to a gentleman named Dave Walkie. He says that phone number, you can call him or text message him and he will respond. The other phone number is Caitlin on his team, who works part-time in the office. That's her direct phone number. You can contact either of them if you have questions about workers' compensation. You can also email both of them at wc.advocate@oregon.gov, and their website is shown here, oregon.gov/dcbs/SBO for Small Business Ombudsman. More resources include the quarterly payroll reports that I warned you about. The instructions for those quarterly payroll reports are at oregon.gov/payroll tax. If you hire employees, you'll need to familiarize yourself with the Oregon Payroll Reporting System, OPRS, which is a web-based platform that allows you to submit your quarterly payroll reports. You'll also need to familiarize yourself with Revenue Online, which is a Department of Revenue system. You'll use that to submit annual reconciliations, which are a different process than the quarterly payroll reports. Oregon OSHA, you can get a free and confidential assessment of your workplace. Their phone number is 800-922-2689. You can email them at consult.web@oregon.gov, and their website is osha.oregon.gov/consult. And my final page of resources include the Oregon Employment Department. If you are looking to hire employees and you are having a hard time with your candidate pool, you can contact the Oregon Employment Department. They do have a free system that can be used for job postings and placements. People who are on unemployment are required to register in that system in order to be matched up with employers who post their jobs on the Employment Department system. The Employment Department can also provide information about incentive programs, and there are a lot of incentive programs out there from the Employment Department, from other agencies as well. And those incentive programs are meant to give you as an employer a little bit of a financial help to get someone hired. You can also contact our office to get information about incentive programs. We can connect you with those resources. I don't have a good way to get a hold of the Employment Department at this time by phone. So I would recommend that you visit their website, which is oregon.gov/employ/businesses. We also have the Oregon Employers Guide, which is available online at our website through the Secretary of State. It basically will tell you a lot of the information and more in 67 pages of encyclopedic information when it comes to being an employer in Oregon. If you want something more than I've shared, I would recommend sitting down and reading that. I wouldn't read it in one sitting because it might dissuade you from hiring an employee. If you have questions about anything that I've talked about, you can contact the Small Business Advocacy team. I'm Trevor Leahy. The rest of the team is listed here. You can reach us toll free at 844-469-5512. You can email us at business.sos@oregon.gov. You might also encounter the Get Help button that's shown here. If you see that button and you click on it, it's going to open up a web form that will take some of your information and create a case for us that we will respond to. So with that, I thank everyone for their time and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.